What if the biggest mistake of your life was actually the beginning of your greatest love? Charlotte just wanted a quiet night and a jar of Nutella. She didn't expect to wake up in the wrong hotel room. She definitely didn't expect the half-naked man standing at the door to be her new boss, one of the most powerful and emotionally unavailable CEOs in the country. But fate doesn't ask for permission, and love rarely arrives dressed the way we imagine. In a world obsessed with perfection and polished appearances, she barged into someone else's reality in unicorn pajamas and accidentally turned his life upside down. What began as a ridiculous mix-up slowly unraveled into something raw, real, and completely unforgettable. Because sometimes the right person comes at the wrong time and still changes everything. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and let us know in the comments, where are you listening from? Your like helps this channel grow and continue bringing emotional stories like this one. Share it with someone special. The light was too bright, the silence and too strange. Charlotte Miller blinked several times, the world around her a blur of warm gold and muted beige. Slowly she sat up, confused by the unfamiliar ceiling and the luxurious linen that clung to her legs. Her head throbbed, not with pain exactly, but with the disorientation of someone who had clearly taken a wrong turn, somewhere between brushing her teeth and wherever this was. She looked down. Pajamas. Pink. Covered in tiny unicorns and glittery stars. A toothpaste-streaked Nutella jar rested in one hand, a lavender toothbrush in the other. "Oh no," she whispered. And then she heard it, a voice, deep, smooth, and unmistakably masculine. "You're definitely not supposed to be here." Charlotte froze. Every molecule of air in her lungs evaporated. She turned slowly, the toothbrush trembling slightly in her grip. There he stood, dripping from the shower, his black hair tousled and wet, wearing nothing but a pair of low-slung jeans and a towel tossed over one shoulder. His chest gleamed with droplets, lean muscles catching the early morning light. But it wasn't just his looks. It was the way he stared at her, not angry, not annoyed, amused. Embarrassment bloomed like wildfire across her face. I think I might have taken the wrong elevator," she stammered, then winced. "Or maybe the wrong floor. Or the wrong hotel altogether. Honestly, I don't even know how this happened." The man tilted his head, arms crossing. "Well, for what it's worth, you're making quite the entrance. Most people just knock." Charlotte scrambled to her feet, dropping the Nutella in the process. It landed with a dull thud on the plush carpet, smearing chocolate on its pristine cream threads. She gasped, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'll pay for that. I mean the cleaning. I mean the carpet. Or the Nutella. Do you want the rest of it?" "No, that's gross. You probably don't want my toothbrush either." He chuckled, a deep, delicious sound that made her cheeks flush hotter. "I'm Grayson," he said, stepping closer, offering a hand as if they were meeting at a brunch instead of in his hotel suite. "Grayson Blake." She froze mid-babble. That name. It sounded familiar. Her brain started spinning like a slot machine, trying to match the face to a headline. Something about tech or investments and then it hit her like a cupcake tray to the face. "Oh my God, you're that Grayson Blake, the tech CEO, the guy behind the Eunoia app? You're hosting the dinner tonight." He raised an eyebrow. "I am? And you are?" She groaned, wanting to melt into the carpet. "Charlotte Miller, I was hired to prepare the desserts for your gala this evening." For a moment, silence. Then, "So, the woman who broke into my hotel room, raided my Nutella stash, and brushed her teeth with my toothbrush is also the pastry chef for my company's most important event of the year." Charlotte bit her lip, already rehearsing her apology speech in her head, one that would likely include quitting before even starting. "I swear I wasn't trying to break in. I got in late, asked for room 1904, and I guess they misheard me or something. I was so tired I just collapsed." She looked up at him, her voice small. "Please don't fire me before I even get to bake the tiramisu." Grayson stared at her for a beat longer, his expression unreadable. Then, to her surprise, he laughed. Like really laughed. Head tilted back, shoulders shaking, the whole thing. "You're serious? You actually thought I'd fire you over this?" "Well, yeah." He walked over to his closet, pulling out a clean shirt as if they were having a totally normal morning conversation. "You're the most entertaining start to a day I've had in years, and frankly I needed that." Charlotte blinked. "You're not mad?" "Nope. Just curious what you're doing with Nutella at 7 a.m. She shrugged. "Emergency sugar therapy." "That's oddly respectable." For the first time she let herself smile, but then a new wave of dread rolled in. "Wait. The dinner. I still have to cook. I need to find my room, get dressed, prep the kitchen. Oh no, the macarons. They need at least 4 hours to rest." Grayson turned back to her with a thoughtful look. "You know what?" Charlotte braced herself. "What?" Instead of scolding her, he said something completely unexpected, something that would change the course of her entire night. No, her entire life. "I've got a crazy idea. What if, instead of working behind the scenes tonight, you joined me at the table?" She blinked. "As in, attend the dinner?" He nodded. "As my guest." Charlotte stared at him, stunned. "Why on earth would you want me there?" Grayson smiled, calm and confident. "Because you're the first person I've met in years who didn't pretend to be something they're not. You barged into my life with unicorn pajamas and Nutella. That's unforgettable." And just like that, the air shifted between them, something unsaid flickering in the silence. Charlotte opened her mouth to protest, but her heart, it fluttered. Charlotte paced the length of the suite like a cat trapped in a glass box. Her mind raced, heart thudding like a battering ram against her ribs. The absurdity of it all hadn't fully sunk in until she caught sight of her reflection. Pink unicorn pajamas, Nutella on her chin, and a look of sheer horror. Grayson Blake. Not only had she woken up in the room of a half-naked billionaire, but that same man was also her client. And not just any client. The client. The man funding the gala dinner she'd been nervously planning for weeks. The one who could turn her career into gold, or bury it beneath the truffle oil and broken sugar sculptures of failure. She stood in the middle of his suite, frozen, while he casually buttoned up his shirt, as if inviting unexpected women with dessert jars into his room was perfectly routine. He glanced at her from the mirror. "You okay? You look like you're calculating your prison sentence." "I am," she muttered, brushing chocolate off her sleeve. "Except in this case, it's professional exile. They'll send me to culinary purgatory." Grayson chuckled, adjusting his collar. "Relax, Charlotte. I'm not pressing charges, though I may have to steal your Nutella trick for stressful mornings." She tried to force a laugh, but it came out as a nervous squeak. "This is a disaster. I should go. I need to, find my actual room, and apologize, and probably cry a little." Hold on," he said, stepping in front of her. "Before you bolt out of here in a sugar panic, can I ask you something?" Charlotte stopped, eyes wide. "Is this where you tell me I've been blacklisted from every tech event for life?" He grinned. "Not even close. I just want to know, why desserts?" The question caught her off guard. "I mean, you clearly love it," he added, motioning toward the Nutella and the unicorns. "But why baking? Why not something more conventional?" Charlotte hesitated. It wasn't a question people asked often, at least not sincerely. "My grandma," she said softly, her voice shifting into something warmer. "She used to say baking was the only kind of magic she believed in. You take all these separate things, flour, sugar, butter, and if you treat them right, they become something beautiful, sweet, comforting, familiar." Grayson listened, his expression softening. "Pastry was the only thing that ever made sense to me," she continued. "It's science, but it's also art. It's feeling. You can taste someone's soul in a good cookie." He nodded, as if genuinely impressed. "Well, Miss Miller, you're full of surprises." She wrinkled her nose. "So are you. I thought you were just another power suit with a six-pack." He laughed at that, full-bodied, genuine. The kind of laugh that made her feel like maybe this wasn't going to end in absolute humiliation after all. Then, suddenly, Charlotte's stomach dropped. "The macarons," she whispered. Grayson tilted his head. "What about them?" "They're temperamental. If I don't start them soon, they'll crack or collapse," or her eyes widened in alarm. "And I have to prep the tiramisu and the mini-tarts, and don't even get me started on the spun sugar dome for the centerpiece." He held up his hands. "Breathe." "I can't breathe. I just lost an hour of prep time brushing my teeth with a stranger's toothbrush and giving an accidental TED talk about cookies." "Then let me make it up to you," he said. She blinked. "Make it up to me?" Grayson walked to the phone on the desk and picked it up. "Give me a moment." He dialed, spoke briefly, and then hung up with a small smile. "I just reassigned the pastry team. They'll take over your menu prep. You're officially off duty." Charlotte stared at him, confused. "Wait, what? Why?" Grayson stepped closer. His eyes sparkled with something between mischief and intent. "Because I have a better idea." She narrowed her eyes. "I'm scared." "You should be," he teased, then added more seriously, "I want you to come to the gala with me." Charlotte blinked. "As in, like a guest?" "As in, wear something stunning, sit next to me, eat the food you inspired, and maybe insult a few billionaires with your culinary honesty." Though she folded her arms. "Why me?" Grayson shrugged. "Because I've sat through 100 of these events with people who all wear the same masks. You, on the other hand, walked into my room like a tornado of chaos and sugar. You're real, refreshing, unpredictable, and I could use that." Charlotte frowned. "You want me to play dress-up and pretend to belong?" "I want you to be exactly who you are." The sincerity in his voice nearly knocked her over. "I don't have a dress," she argued weakly. "I don't know how to mingle with CEOs. I trip over nothing and say things like culinary purgatory. I'm not made for black tie anything." He smiled, slow and confident. "Lucky for you, I know someone who does have a dress." Before she could argue further, his phone buzzed. Grayson glanced at it and turned to her. "Fashion emergency response team is downstairs. French. Brilliant. Slightly terrifying." Charlotte's eyes widened. "You have a stylist on speed dial? Don't you?" She couldn't help but laugh. Grayson walked over, offering his hand once more, not as a stranger this time, but as something new, unexpected, complicated. "Say yes, Charlotte." She stared at his hand, at the man who just hours ago was nothing more than a name on her contract. "Okay," she said quietly, "but I have conditions." He raised an eyebrow. "Hit me." "I choose the dress. I get dessert. And if I embarrass myself, you take full responsibility." Grayson grinned. "Deal." As she followed him toward the elevator, still clutching her toothbrush and jar of Nutella, Charlotte had the strange sense that her life had just turned a very unexpected corner, and she wasn't sure whether to run away from it or run straight into it. Charlotte had always imagined that a stylist's studio would smell like expensive perfume or something vaguely European. Instead, this one smelled like lavender, sewing chalk, and steaming espresso. The Frenchwoman, Isabelle, as she sternly introduced herself, measured Charlotte with the precision of a scientist and the skepticism of an art critic. The experience was both humbling and slightly hilarious. Every time Charlotte tried to crack a joke to ease the tension, Isabelle would lift one elegant eyebrow and whisper a judgmental "non." Grayson had been whisked away for business calls, but not before giving Charlotte a wink and a reassuring, "You've got this." She wasn't so sure. She felt like a pastry about to be over-decorated. "Do you usually dress like this?" Isabelle asked in her thick Parisian accent, eyeing the unicorn pajamas as though they were a personal affront. "I was going for midnight emergency snack run," Charlotte replied with a shrug. Isabelle sighed deeply, tragedy apparently, and disappeared into a closet that looked like Narnia for couture. When she returned, she carried a midnight blue dress with subtle silver accents, flowing fabric that shimmered like starlight. Charlotte's breath caught. "That's stunning." Isabel handed it over with solemn reverence. "Midnight blue brings out the hope in brown eyes. Très romantique." Then as Charlotte changed in the dressing room, she felt the absurdity of her life come crashing down again. Just hours ago, she was rolling cookie dough in a hotel kitchen. Now she was about to walk into a billionaire's gala. On the arm of the man she'd accidentally toothbrush bombed, she slipped into the dress. It fit like magic. Not tight, not loud, just right. When she stepped out, Isabel clapped her hands and muttered something in French that sounded like holy praise. Charlotte stood in front of the mirror, stunned. "I look like I belong at one of those elegant rooftop parties with string lights and jazz playing in the background." "You look like you, finally seen," Isabel corrected, placing a silver pin behind Charlotte's ear. "Remember, chérie, authenticity is the rarest form of elegance." The black car waiting outside felt like something out of a movie. Shiny, sleek, absurdly quiet. Grayson was already inside in a tux that somehow made him look both regal and impossibly relaxed. When Charlotte slid in beside him, he paused mid-phone call, did a visible double-take, and promptly forgot what he was saying. "Sorry," he murmured into the phone. "I have to call you back." He ended the call and turned to her fully. "You look... If you say, like a dream, I'm getting out of the car," she warned. He laughed. "I was going to say like someone who's about to completely derail a billionaire dinner in the best way possible." She smirked, the nerves still buzzing beneath her skin. "That's oddly comforting." "Good, because I have one rule for tonight." Charlotte blinked. "Just one?" He nodded. No pretending. The car slid into the valet area of the Grand Marlowe Hotel, where fairy lights framed the marble entryway and a red carpet gleamed beneath their feet. Grayson stepped out first, then turned and offered his hand to her again, a gesture that was starting to feel dangerously natural. Cameras flashed. People whispered. Charlotte's stomach flipped like an over-baked soufflé. Inside, the ballroom looked like it had been kissed by a chandelier. Golds and creams glowed from every corner, and the hum of high-powered conversations buzzed like electricity. Grayson guided her through it like she belonged there. And to everyone's surprise, including her own, Charlotte didn't fall. She didn't spill champagne. She didn't even trip over the train of her dress. But she did make waves. First, by being real. A woman in diamonds asked her if she was wearing Elie Saab. Charlotte blinked. "Is that a type of sorbet?" The woman stared, offended. Grayson nearly choked on his wine from laughing. Then came the dessert. The final course of the evening was presented with great flair, white chocolate domes filled with raspberry mousse, drizzled with saffron reduction. Charlotte took one bite and winced. Across the table, Grayson raised an eyebrow. "Something wrong?" She leaned in, whispering behind her napkin. "They overbaked the dome. The shell's dry. Also, who pairs saffron with raspberry? That's culinary confusion." "You should tell them." "I'm not here to start a pastry war." Grayson grinned. "I dare you." So she did. Charlotte stood up, walked right over to the head chef, who looked both shocked and slightly terrified, and gave a polite but firm critique. Guests watched in horror and fascination. And then the chef laughed, a genuine, humble laugh. He nodded, thanked her, and whispered that he'd suspected the saffron was overkill too. Charlotte returned to the table to scattered claps and a few awestruck gazes. Grayson leaned closer. "You're going to be famous by dessert." Too late," she muttered, noticing several people filming. He tilted his head. "Regrets?" She shook her head. "Just one." "What's that?" "I wish I hadn't worn my emergency Nutella pajamas as a first impression." Grayson's smile faded slightly, replaced by something softer. "Actually, I think that's what made all of this possible." Charlotte looked up at him, suddenly aware of how close they were sitting, how easy it was to talk to him, how natural it felt, and how dangerous that might be. Because when the night ends, reality always comes back, right? But before she could ask herself what came next, Grayson stood and extended his hand one more time. "Dance with me." Charlotte hesitated, not because she didn't want to, but because part of her already knew. This wasn't pretend anymore. The dance floor sparkled under the weight of golden light, casting shifting patterns across the polished marble as a slow jazz tune flowed from the grand piano in the corner. It was the kind of place Charlotte had only seen in movies, the kind with orchestras, whispered secrets, and women who never seemed to sweat. Grayson's hand in hers felt steady, warm, as he guided her into the rhythm of the music. Charlotte's heart beat in sync with the gentle sway, though her steps were still cautious, unsure. "I'm not exactly Ginger Rogers," she whispered, avoiding his gaze as her heels scuffed softly on the floor. "I'm not exactly Fred Astaire," he replied with a smile. "More like a tech mogul who can count to 4. She looked up at him, her lips curving. "At least one of us has rhythm." He leaned in slightly. "You're doing just fine. Better than fine." But even as the music carried them, Charlotte's thoughts kept circling. She didn't belong here, not really. This world, with its whispered deals and legacy surnames, it wasn't made for girls from Oakland who grew up baking cookies to escape family drama. And yet, the way Grayson looked at her, not with expectation or calculation, but genuine curiosity, made her question that belief. After the dance, they returned to their table, and a woman in a silver sequined gown stopped them. She was elegant, with a posture so perfect it looked painful. "You're the pastry chef, aren't you?" she asked Charlotte, her tone sharp but not unkind. Charlotte nodded cautiously. "That's me." "I saw the video. Your critique of the dessert? Hilarious." "Oh no," Charlotte groaned. "That's online already." "Of course, everything's online," the woman smiled. "But honestly, it was refreshing. No one's honest in this room, not unless it's strategic." Charlotte blinked. "I wasn't trying to make a point, I just said what I tasted." "Exactly," the woman replied, before disappearing into the crowd. Later, when the evening finally drew to a close, Grayson escorted her through the hushed halls of the hotel, the distant clinking of glasses echoing behind them. They walked in silence, their footsteps soft on the carpeted floor. "I feel like Cinderella," Charlotte murmured. Grayson looked at her. "Except it's midnight, and your glass slippers are probably Crocs." To her, she snorted. "Close, I brought my emergency sneakers. They're in the hotel room with my dignity." He grinned. "You stole the night, you know." "I was trying not to trip." "You reminded everyone what real charm looks like." Charlotte tilted her head. "You mean chaos and frosting?" "I mean honesty. Humor. That thing where you speak like your filter's permanently under construction." She laughed, surprised at how that didn't feel like an insult coming from him. They reached the door to her hotel room, the correct one this time, and paused. "I had fun tonight," she said softly. "Me too." Charlotte's fingers hovered over the keycard, but her mind was already spinning ahead. Tomorrow, the videos, the whispers, the questions. And after that, reality. Back to work. Back to her life. This night wasn't hers to keep. Still, something in her wasn't ready to let it go just yet. "I still feel like an imposter," she admitted, turning to him. "Like I snuck into someone else's world." Grayson's expression shifted. "You didn't sneak in, you lit it up." She looked away, feeling the weight of his words settle somewhere deep. He hesitated, then reached into his inner pocket and pulled out something unexpected. A silver spoon. She blinked. "Is that one of the dessert spoons from the gala?" "Technically, yes," he admitted. "But I had it engraved." He handed it to her, and Charlotte read the inscription. "A little chaos makes everything sweeter." Her throat tightened. "I figured," he said quietly, "if you're going to change my world, you might as well have a proper spoon for it." Charlotte didn't trust herself to speak, so she nodded instead. Grayson stepped back, his gaze lingering just a second too long. "Good night, Charlotte." and then he was gone. She entered the room, shut the door behind her and leaned against it, spoon clutched in her hand, heart thrumming with questions she didn't know how to ask. Why did this feel like the start of something? Why did he make her feel seen? And what exactly was she supposed to do with the growing ache in her chest every time he looked at her like that? Outside, San Francisco glittered. Inside, Charlotte stood barefoot on a hotel room rug, in a borrowed gown, holding a stolen spoon. And all she could think was, something is changing and I don't know how to stop it. The second night of the gala felt grander than the first. Gone was the whimsical dress from the night before. Tonight, Charlotte wore sleek black with a satin finish and sleeves that made her feel like she could command a room, even if all she really wanted to do was hide behind a dessert table. She'd insisted on picking the dress herself, and somehow Isabel had agreed. It was still elegant, but a little more her, slightly imperfect, with a hidden pocket for emergency chocolate. She stood beside Grayson in the elevator, trying to steady her breath. This was no longer just a one-off event. She was now visible. People recognized her, whispered when she passed. One woman had even asked for a selfie on the way to the car. "This is getting weird," she murmured as the elevator chimed. Grayson smirked. "Weird can be good. I prefer invisible, less pressure, fewer headlines. I prefer authentic. You've changed the mood of this entire event, Charlotte. I also insulted a dessert in front of 50 millionaires. They loved you for it. I'm not sure that's the word I'd use." As they stepped into the ballroom, she saw it. The room was buzzing in a way that felt different from the night before. There was a strange energy in the air, sharper, more curious. Eyes turned toward her with something that looked suspiciously like anticipation. She leaned toward Grayson. "I feel like I'm being set up." "You are," he said cheerfully. "To succeed." She gave him a glare. "If there's saffron again, I'm blaming you." They were guided to the head table, where Charlotte's breath caught. Seated beside Grayson was a man whose face she recognized from magazine covers, business blogs, and late-night television profiles. William Blake, Grayson's father. The man known for building empires with one hand while crushing dreams with the other. He was sharply dressed in a midnight suit, his silver hair combed with precision, and his eyes calculating as they swept over Charlotte. "Father," Grayson said evenly, "this is Charlotte Miller." William offered a single nod. "The pastry chef." Charlotte smiled nervously. "That's me, in the flesh, and mostly frosting." Silence. And then, unexpectedly, the corner of William's mouth twitched upward. Not a smile exactly, but something close. As the dinner progressed, Charlotte tried to focus on the food rather than the stares. The entree was exquisite, duck confit with truffle risotto. Even she had to admit it was a masterpiece. But then came the dessert, another dome, another raspberry reduction, this time with lavender foam. Charlotte paused, spoon halfway to her mouth. Grayson noticed immediately. "Problem?" "Not yet." She took a bite and instantly regretted it. The foam was overpowering, the dome overchilled, the raspberry reduced into oblivion. She glanced at Grayson, then at the rest of the table. William Blake was eating his with robotic precision. The others wore polite expressions, sipping wine and nodding like everything was perfect. Charlotte sighed. "Okay, I can't do it. I have to say something." Grayson leaned in. "You sure? There's no pressure tonight." "Oh, there's pressure," she muttered. "Just not the kind that shuts me up." She cleared her throat gently and turned to the table. "I'm sorry," she began, addressing no one and everyone at once. "I know I'm not exactly the expected critic here, but can we just admit this dessert is kind of a disaster?" Forks froze mid-air, heads turned. Somewhere, a violinist missed a note. Charlotte continued, heart pounding. "I mean, the dome is too cold, so the center's like chewing ice cream-flavored cement. And the lavender foam tastes like someone dipped a candle into a smoothie." Absolute silence. And then William Blake laughed. Not a polite chuckle, a real laugh. Deep and gravelly, it filled the room like thunder rolling through a cathedral. The table stared at him, stunned. "She's right," he said finally, setting down his fork. "This is pretentious nonsense." A woman 2 seats down gasped audibly. Another whispered, "Did he just agree with her?" Charlotte looked at Grayson, eyes wide. He smiled. "Told you. You're changing the room." From that point on, the atmosphere at the table shifted. People began to loosen up, actually speak, debate, even laugh. Conversations turned real. One man confessed he hated caviar, but ate it because he thought it made him look important. A woman in diamonds said she missed boxed mac and cheese. It was absurd and oddly beautiful. And through it all, Charlotte stayed herself, honest, awkward, completely unfiltered. Later, as they walked out into the cool evening air, she leaned her head back and sighed. "I think I survived." "You didn't just survive," Grayson said. "You rewrote the script. I insulted your caterer. Twice. And somehow, you got my father to laugh. I've seen him crush company founders for sneezing during board meetings, but you made him laugh over a ruined moose." Charlotte smiled at that. "Do I get a medal? No. But maybe a cookie?" Her eyes lit up. "That's the best offer I've had all night." They laughed together, walking slowly toward the car, steps unhurried, like neither of them wanted the night to end. But Charlotte's thoughts drifted again. This was all magical, surreal. But could it last? Was she just a charming novelty to Grayson's world, or was something real beginning to bloom between sugar and sarcasm? As the car door opened and Grayson reached for her hand once more, she wasn't sure of the answer. But her heart was quietly hoping. The suite was quiet. Too quiet. Charlotte stepped out of her heels and sighed as she sank onto the plush sofa in Grayson's penthouse. The lights were dimmed, casting long, soft shadows across the space. Through the wide glass windows, San Francisco glittered below like a sea of stardust, a city that never slept. But tonight, she wanted silence more than sparkle. Grayson entered behind her, loosening the knot of his tie. "You sure you don't want champagne to celebrate your new title as dessert revolutionary?" She smiled faintly. "Tempting, but I think my blood is already 80% sugar from that dessert." He chuckled and moved toward the small bar in the corner. "Tea, then?" "Perfect." She watched him in the quiet. How comfortable he looked here, surrounded by luxury and silence. And yet, tonight, she'd seen something shift in him. Not just the easy confidence he always wore, but something more raw beneath it. A flicker of vulnerability when he looked at his father, a softness when he looked at her. He returned with 2 mugs, handing one to her before settling into the opposite couch. For a while they just sipped, the moment lingering like steam between them. And then, softly, "You surprised me tonight." Charlotte looked up. "By trashing your dessert again in public?" "No," he said. "By being unapologetically you, even when it would have been easier to fade into the background." "Fab," she set her mug down, suddenly aware of the weight behind his words. "You brought me into this world, Grayson," she said. "But it's not my world. I keep waiting for someone to tap me on the shoulder and escort me out." "You think I belong here?" he asked quietly. "I walk into those rooms and feel like a product, a polished version of a man who exists just to keep investors calm." Charlotte tilted her head. "Then why do you stay?" He hesitated. "Because I built something that matters. And part of me thought, if I just keep growing it, maybe I'll find something real along the way." He looked at her then, really looked, the kind of gaze that made her chest tighten and her throat go dry. "And now I wonder if I already have." Charlotte's heart jumped. She opened her mouth, maybe to make a joke, maybe to deflect, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she reached down and pulled her legs beneath her, curling into the cushions like she was finally allowing herself to be at home here. "I never thought I'd end up in a place like this," she admitted. "Growing up, we didn't even have heat some winters. I used to bake just to warm up the kitchen. The oven was the closest thing we had to a fireplace." Grayson listened, silent and still. My mom called baking a luxury. Said dreaming was a luxury too, but my grandma used to say it differently. She said, "Sweetheart, the best things in life start with a little heat and a lot of hope." He smiled at that, slow and tender. "Your grandma sounds like a woman I'd like to meet." "She would have liked you," Charlotte said. "Eventually." A beat of quiet passed. Then Grayson stood and walked to the kitchen. "What are you doing?" she asked, following him with her eyes. He pulled open a drawer, then another. "Looking for flour." Charlotte blinked. "At midnight? You just told me the oven is the heart of your world. I want to know what that looks like." She laughed. "You want to bake something now?" He opened the fridge. "We have eggs, butter, and... oh, look, a miracle. 2 bars of dark chocolate." She stood, walked over, and leaned against the counter. "You're insane. And you're stalling. Come on, chef. Teach me something." So she did. They worked side by side, mixing ingredients in stolen quiet. Her hands guided his, fixing his grip on the whisk, teasing him when he cracked an egg like a caveman. At one point, he got flour on his shirt, and she tried to wipe it off, but her fingers lingered longer than they should have. When the cookies were finally in the oven, the air filled with that unmistakable smell. Brown sugar, vanilla, melting chocolate. Comfort. Home. They sat on the floor in front of the oven, shoulder to shoulder, watching the dough rise like magic. "I can't remember the last time my house smelled like this," Grayson said softly. Charlotte leaned her head back against the cabinet. "It's the scent of starting over." He turned to her then, eyes studying her face, the curve of her mouth, the softness in her gaze. And for a long, fragile moment, neither of them said a word. Then Grayson whispered, "This isn't pretend anymore, is it?" She didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. What started as an accident, a wrong room, a toothbrush, a jar of Nutella, had shifted into something else, something real, something that neither of them had expected, and neither of them knew how to stop. The first batch of cookies cooled on the marble counter, their golden edges still warm, soft centers releasing ribbons of steam. The scent of vanilla and chocolate had wrapped itself around the kitchen like a comforter, thick, sweet, familiar. It didn't smell like a billionaire's penthouse anymore. It smelled like home. Charlotte broke a cookie in half and offered one side to Grayson without a word. He took it. They both bit in at the same time, and she watched the way his eyes closed just slightly. The smallest pause of someone allowing themselves to feel something real in a world where everything was curated, filtered, and prepared. "Okay," he said, mouthful. "This is officially the best thing I've tasted in weeks." "Be careful," she warned. "Cookies are a gateway drug. First it's chocolate chips. Next thing you know, you're crying over snickerdoodles." The Grayson smiled, but the look in his eyes was different now, softer, deeper, like something unsaid had been sitting just behind his ribcage, waiting for a quiet moment like this. Charlotte hopped onto the counter, swinging her legs gently. "My grandma used to say, if your heart's too heavy to carry, put it in the dough and let the oven do the rest." Grayson leaned against the opposite counter, arms crossed. "She sounds like she had all the answers." "It's only the sweet ones," she said with a shrug. "The rest she left for me to figure out." He watched her, not saying anything. And then, with unusual seriousness, he asked, "When was the last time someone showed up for you?" The question hit her like a crack in the shell of one of her macarons, small but deep enough to ruin the structure. She hesitated, then looked away. "I don't know." Grayson stepped forward, gently placing his half-eaten cookie down. "I don't mean for a party or a dinner," he said. "I mean really showed up, no agenda, no saving, just stayed." Charlotte ran her fingers along the edge of the counter, thinking, "Maybe never. I was always the one fixing things. My mom, my siblings, the bakery. It was easier to keep giving than to expect anything back." She glanced up. "What about you? You ever feel like people show up just because of your name?" He let out a dry laugh. "All the time." Most days I'm not sure if people see me or just the image they've built around me. Grayson Blake, charming CEO, tech innovator, heir to the Blake empire. It's like being a walking resume. Must be lonely, she said quietly. It is. They fell into silence again, the kind that didn't feel awkward but thick with things neither of them had said out loud before. After a moment, Charlotte jumped off the counter and walked to the window. Below, the city lights flickered like a blanket of distant stars. I've never had this, she said, Ma. This kind of quiet. The good kind, where no one needs anything from me, where I'm not trying to fix a mess or prove I deserve to be in the room. Grayson joined her, his hand resting gently on the windowsill just inches from hers. You don't have to prove anything to me. She looked at him, searching his face. That's the thing, Grayson. I think you're the first person I actually believe when you say that. The room felt warmer now, not from the cookies, not from the lights, but from the slow, simmering connection stretching between them. Not loud, not urgent, but undeniable. He turned toward her, voice barely above a whisper. Charlotte, what is this? She didn't answer. Because they both knew the truth. What started as an accident, a wrong room, a toothbrush, a jar of Nutella, had shifted into something else, something real, something that neither of them had expected, and neither of them knew how to stop. Charlotte woke up to the soft hum of her phone vibrating somewhere under a pillow. She groaned, squinting against the sunlight slicing through the curtains. Her body ached in that delicious, sleep-heavy way, a mixture of sugar crashes and emotional hangovers. She rolled over, still in her dress shirt from the night before, and reached for the phone. 27 missed calls, 54 text messages, and at least 100 notifications from social media apps she barely used. Her stomach dropped. No good day ever started like this. She opened the first text, from her best friend Rosie to Rose Girl. Get up, you're a meme. Also, I swear to God, if that man hurts you, I will show up with a rolling pin and a vengeance. Charlotte blinked. Oh no. She sat up, the bedsheet falling around her waist, and opened Instagram. The first thing she saw was a video clip, grainy footage taken from someone's phone, of her at the gala, standing next to Grayson, pointing at a dessert and passionately explaining what had gone wrong. A subtitle in bold letters read, "The CEO, the chef, and the cinnamon scandal." Charlotte pressed play. In the clip, Grayson was laughing at her critique. Her hands were waving. Someone had edited sparkles and dramatic music over it, turning it into some kind of slow-motion rom-com trailer. Beneath the video, the comments were exploding. I want someone to look at me the way he looks at her explaining pastry foam. Can we talk about how she said, lavender foam tastes like a candle smoothie, and he laughed? A Nutella love story is the only love story I believe in now. She groaned, tossing the phone on the bed. No, nope, we are not doing this. But it was too late. The internet had done what it does best, taken one moment of human vulnerability and turned it into a viral sensation. By noon, hashtags were trending. Chef in love, Pastrygate, Charlotte vs the dessert elite, and her personal favorite/nightmare, unicorns and billionaires. Her inbox was flooded with interview requests, baking sponsorships, and even a direct message from a popular late-night host asking if she'd be willing to appear on the show. Charlotte buried her face in her hands. This wasn't her life. She was a baker, a behind-the-scenes kind of person. She measured butter by grams and solved stress with cinnamon. She didn't do microphones or flashing cameras or public love stories, especially not ones that had started with a toothbrush mix-up. Then the phone rang again, this time Rosie. Charlotte answered with a sigh. Please tell me you brought coffee. No, but I brought something better, Rosie said, voice sharp with attitude and love. Perspective. Tanch boy. I told you, Rosie continued, the second that man looked at you like you were made of magic and marshmallows, it was over. Charlotte flopped back on the bed. I don't even know what this is, or what to do. Well, Rosie said, you can start by breathing. Then you can get dressed and come over to the diner. I'm making pancakes, emergency-level pancakes. Charlotte smiled. You always know what I need. You need grounding. And probably carbs. Also, we need to talk about the fact that your face is literally on a BuzzFeed list called 10 Times Romance Was Real in 2025. Charlotte paused. BuzzFeed? Rosie's voice dropped. Yeah. And one of the gifs is you saying, culinary purgatory. You're officially a Gen Z icon. Charlotte groaned again. I didn't sign up for any of this. No, babe, Rosie said, softer now. You didn't. But maybe, just maybe, this is what it looks like when the universe says yes to you. After the call ended, Charlotte sat for a long moment. She looked around the suite. The clothes on the floor, the silver spoon on the nightstand, the faint smell of cookies still lingering in the air. Grayson hadn't texted yet, but somehow she wasn't worried. There was something in the way he had looked at her, not like a secret to keep, but like a truth he'd finally found. Still, the reality was louder than any whisper between them. The world had seen them now, and it wouldn't be satisfied with silence. There would be questions, press, expectations, and Charlotte had never been one to perform. Later that afternoon, just as she was putting her hair into a loose bun and digging through her bag for lip balm, her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I heard the internet has opinions. Want to escape? I know a place that sells the best eclairs on the West Coast. Gee. Charlotte smiled. Small, surprised, soft. She typed back, only if they have coffee and zero lavender foam. And seconds later, deal cars downstairs. She slipped on her sneakers, grabbed her favorite hoodie, and headed toward the elevator, because maybe this wasn't the life she'd planned. But it was somehow beginning to feel like the one meant for her. The cafe was quiet, tucked away on a tree-lined street in Pacific Heights, with soft jazz humming in the background and the smell of roasted hazelnut drifting through the air. It wasn't the kind of place billionaires typically went. No flashy decor, no name-drop pastries, no influencers posing with espresso. Which was exactly why Grayson had chosen it. Charlotte sat across from him at a small round table by the window, her hands wrapped around a cup of black coffee. She wore no makeup. Her hair was pulled into a loose braid, and her oversized sweater looked like it belonged to a Sunday morning, not a media storm. Grayson reached for his cup, but paused. Have you slept? He asked. She gave a half smile. Define sleep. If you mean scrolling through memes of myself at 3 a.m., then yes, I'm very well rested. He sighed. I didn't want this to happen like this. Charlotte looked out the window, watching two kids chase a pigeon across the sidewalk. I know. They turned you into a brand overnight, and us into a headline. I know, she repeated, softer this time. Grayson set his cup down gently. That's not what I want. I don't want you to feel like this is just a storyline to manage. You're not a marketing angle. She met his eyes. But that's what it feels like. He didn't argue. He didn't need to. The truth hung between them like fog. Charlotte shifted in her seat. I didn't sign up to be a symbol, or a spokesperson, or some Cinderella case study for magazine covers. I just wanted to bake cookies and maybe pay my rent on time. Grayson reached into his jacket and pulled out a thin folder. He slid it across the table toward her. She raised an eyebrow. What's this? He hesitated. A plan. An idea. Something real. Charlotte opened it, and her heart nearly stopped. Blueprints, handwritten notes, a projected timeline, a mock-up of a storefront. At the top, in bold, Miller's Patisserie, your story, your rules. With his name signed underneath her eyes snapped up. You want to invest in me? He nodded. Not because you went viral, not because of the buzz, but because I believe in what you create, in what you are. You turned my world upside down, Charlotte, and not with a viral tweet, but with a cookie. She swallowed hard. You'd give me that kind of freedom, creative control, ownership, every ounce of it. She stared at him, blinking back the sting behind her eyes. And in return, she asked carefully, He leaned forward, voice low. That we protect this. Us. Whatever this is. It only works if it's ours first. Not theirs. Silence. Only the hum of the jazz and the distant clink of a spoon at another table. Charlotte took a breath. If we do this, I need conditions. His mouth curved. I figured. 1. No solo interviews. If the media wants our story, they get us together. Not your version or mine. Ours. Done. Society 2. We keep the bakery about baking. Not about the billionaire's girlfriend. I want it to be known for flavor, not fame. Agreed. 3. She paused. We always check in, with each other. If it ever feels like we're losing us to them, we stop, we talk, we reset. Grayson nodded, his expression serious. Always. She searched his face, every line, every hesitation. And last one, she added. We choose each other, no matter what the internet says, no matter the noise, no matter the headlines. He reached for her hand across the table, fingers warm and grounding. Especially then. A beat passed, then another. And then, softly, because she needed to say it out loud, Charlotte whispered, I don't know where this goes, but I want to find out. Grayson smiled. So do I. Their hands stayed there, fingers intertwined, coffee cooling, the world still watching. But for the first time, Charlotte didn't feel like she was performing. She felt like she was building something. On her terms, and beside her, the man who somehow saw all of her, from unicorn pajamas to pastry critiques, and never once asked her to be anything else. The studio lights were blinding. Not metaphorically, or literally. They burned down from above like miniature suns, washing everything in a blizzard of brightness. Charlotte blinked twice, trying to keep her expression somewhere between calm, professional, and please don't let me faint on live television. Grayson sat beside her on the minimalist white couch, looking effortlessly relaxed in a navy blazer and open collar. Of course he looked calm. He'd probably done this 100 times. Charlotte, on the other hand, had never been mic'd up, earpieced, and professionally powdered in her life. The host, a charismatic woman named Lydia with perfect posture and sharp eyes, smiled at the camera as the intro music faded. Welcome back to Good Morning Bay Area. Today we have a very special pair joining us. You've seen them all over the internet, the CEO and the pastry chef, whose unlikely story has stolen millions of hearts, and started 1 or 2 dessert debates along the way. Please welcome Grayson Blake and Charlotte Miller. Applause, smiles. Charlotte waved awkwardly. Grayson offered a charming nod. Lydia leaned in with practiced curiosity. Okay, let's start at the beginning. Charlotte, you broke into Grayson's hotel room. Charlotte let out a breathy laugh. Not intentionally. I was exhausted, asked for room 1904, and the receptionist must have misheard me. I woke up in his bed, fully clothed by the way, holding a jar of Nutella and a toothbrush that wasn't mine. Grayson added, and I walked out of the shower to find her in unicorn pajamas, brushing her teeth like she owned the place. Laughter erupted in the studio. Lydia clutched her chest. I mean, you can't make that up. Charlotte nodded. Believe me, if I could have made it up, I would have made it a lot less embarrassing. Lydia smiled. But what happened next? Most people would have run. You stayed. Charlotte glanced at Grayson. He didn't throw me out. He laughed. And then he invited me to dinner. Not for dinner. To dinner. Grayson leaned forward. The event was a corporate gala. I was tired of pretending with people who all said the same things. And here was this woman, honest, hilarious, holding my toothbrush, and I thought, maybe this is what real looks like. The audience let out a collective, "Oh!" Lydia grinned. Now let's talk about the moment that broke the internet, the dessert critique. Charlotte covered her face. Oh no. Grayson chuckled. She was brutally honest. Said the foam tasted like a lavender candle, and the dome was colder than her ex-boyfriend's texts. Which is true, Charlotte interjected. Lydia raised an eyebrow. And Grayson, you weren't offended? He shook his head. Are you kidding? I was enchanted. Everyone else sugarcoats. She brings the sugar and tells the truth. So that got a second round of laughter. Charlotte looked at Lydia, eyes steady now. I didn't plan for any of this. Not the attention, not the memes, not the bakery sponsors sliding into my DMs. I just wanted to make food that makes people feel something. Lydia softened. And now? Charlotte hesitated, then smiled. Now I want the same thing, just louder. Lydia leaned in. So is this a real romance, or are you two just playing into the moment? The question didn't land like a punch. It landed like a held breath. Grayson didn't miss a beat. He reached over, took Charlotte's hand gently and said, "We didn't start this story for the cameras, and we're not going to end it for them either." Charlotte added, her voice quiet but clear, "This isn't just a headline. It's a beginning. A very weird, very sweet beginning." Applause. Not the loud, forced kind, the real kind, warm and slow and lingering. Backstage after the interview, Charlotte collapsed onto the couch, removing her earpiece like it had been attached to her soul. "I can't believe I said ex-boyfriend's texts on live TV." Grayson grinned, handing her a water bottle. "America thanks you for your service." She groaned, covering her face again. "I'm going to be on every dating meme page by dinner." He sat beside her, brushing his fingers against hers. "Let them talk. Let them watch. We know what this is." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Yeah, we do." He paused. "Also, I'm printing that foam quote on a coffee mug." Charlotte laughed, the kind that came from somewhere deep, a laugh that knew how far she'd come from that first night, holding Nutella and a stranger's toothbrush. Now she held something else entirely, a dream that was finally waking up. And a man who looked at her like she wasn't just part of a story, but the reason it had meaning in the first place. The smell of fresh cinnamon rolls drifted into the street, long before anyone saw the pastel blue sign. Miller's Patisserie. Estart today. It was painted in delicate cursive on the glass storefront, surrounded by tiny white flowers and a handwritten menu taped to the door with, "Be patient, we're new at this," scribbled at the bottom. Inside, the walls were warm cream, the shelves lined with copper pans and family photos, and the display case full of chaos and charm. Almond croissants slightly uneven, lemon tarts dusted with powdered sugar hearts, and cookies that tasted like childhood memories. Charlotte stood behind the counter, apron dusted in flour, cheeks flushed with the heat of the ovens, and the surreal joy of watching a lifelong dream bloom in real time. It was opening day, and the line was out the door. Rosie was manning the espresso machine with the fierce concentration of a woman defending a national treasure. "2 lavender lattes and 1 chai, she barked, then turned to Charlotte and whispered, "If one more person asks if Grayson's going to show up shirtless, I'm pouring syrup in their shoes." Charlotte laughed. "They came for the cookies, I hope." Rosie rolled her eyes. "They came for the cookies, stayed for the romance, and now they think this is some rom-com pop-up experience." But Charlotte didn't mind. Not really. She moved through the bakery like someone who belonged to it, because she did. Every tile, every recipe, every moment had her fingerprint on it. The countertop mixer, a refurbished gift from her grandmother's kitchen. The wall art, doodles from old recipe notebooks framed in gold. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. And that meant everything. Mid-morning, between batches, Charlotte stepped outside for a breath of cool air. The city moved around her in quiet rhythm, and for the first time in a long time she felt still. And then a voice behind her said, "Hey, chef." She turned. Grayson stood at the edge of the sidewalk, wearing jeans, a white button-up rolled at the sleeves, and a smile that didn't belong to a CEO. It belonged to a man completely undone by love. Charlotte's heart did its usual leap. "You're late," she teased. "I had to pick something up." He walked closer, hands behind his back. She raised an eyebrow. "If it's another giant flower arrangement, I'm going to cry. My refrigerator can't take the emotional pressure." "It's not flowers," he said. He stepped forward and revealed what he was holding. A small, rustic wooden box. Charlotte blinked. That's definitely not edible. Open it. She did. Inside, nestled in velvet, were 6 vintage silver measuring spoons, each engraved with a single word: honesty, passion, laughter, adventure, love, forever. Her breath caught. "I figured," he said gently, "if we're building something together, we should start with your language. Measurements." Charlotte looked up at him, eyes full. "Grayson?" He took the box from her, set it on the bench behind them, and dropped to one knee, right there, in front of the bakery she built, in the apron she'd worn through 100 cookie experiments, with flour still clinging to her fingers. "I fell in love with you the moment you criticized that ridiculous dessert, and every moment since, you've only reminded me why I never want to go back to a life without you in it. You've taught me that sweetness isn't in the sugar, it's in truth, in showing up, in choosing someone every single day." He opened a tiny compartment under the spoons and pulled out a simple, elegant ring, a gold band with a single diamond shaped like a droplet. Charlotte's hands flew to her mouth. "Marry me, Charlotte. Let's build the kind of life that smells like cookies and sounds like laughter." Tears welled in her eyes. She didn't need time, didn't need logic. Everything inside her, every scar, every secret, every part she once hid, screamed yes. She nodded. "Yes," she whispered, then laughed. "Yes, you idiot. Of course, yes." Sahi slipped the ring on her finger and stood just in time to catch her as she launched into his arms, spinning them both in a blur of laughter, powdered sugar, and disbelief. From inside the bakery, someone clapped, then someone else. Rosie opened the door, wiping her hands on a towel. "Did he do it?" Charlotte held up her hand, tears still streaming. Rosie pointed at Grayson. "If you ever hurt her, I will beat you with a baguette." Grayson grinned. "Fair enough." So back inside, the bakery buzzed louder than ever. Charlotte stood behind the counter again, side by side with the man who somehow became the recipe she never knew she was missing. And in that moment, surrounded by cookies, laughter, and the woman she used to be, Charlotte understood. You don't always recognize the beginning of the rest of your life when it starts, but sometimes it comes with a ring and 6 engraved spoons. The patisserie was quiet now. The last customer had left half an hour ago, the bell above the door giving its final chime as the afternoon sun dipped low, casting golden light through the windows. The scent of cookies still lingered in the air, mixing with vanilla bean, brown butter, and something warmer, something intangible: love. Charlotte stood barefoot on the cool tiled floor, arms crossed, watching as Grayson carefully wiped flour from the edge of the marble counter, terribly, she might add. The man could negotiate billion-dollar deals, but still managed to smear butter with the grace of a toddler. She smirked. "That's not how you clean a surface." "I'm contributing to the ambiance," he said, waving the towel like a white flag. "You wanted this place to feel lived in, not like a crime scene." First he laughed, walked over, and kissed her temple. They didn't speak for a while. Enuma just stood there, breathing in everything that had brought them here. The wrong hotel room, the toothbrush, the Nutella, the chaos, the quiet, the fear of not belonging, the wonder of being truly seen. Charlotte looked down at her hand, the ring still new, the warmth of his proposal still blooming in her chest like a second heartbeat. And she thought, it wasn't supposed to happen like this. She wasn't supposed to fall in love with a man like him. He wasn't supposed to find his heart in a bakery. They weren't supposed to belong to each other. But somehow, against all logic and through the mess of public spectacle, personal doubt, and the absurdity of viral fame, they did. They belonged. Later that evening, after Rosie left muttering something about the honeymoon phase being a lie and threatening to sleep in the stockroom to keep them from accidentally burning the place down with passion, Charlotte and Grayson curled up together in the small lounge at the back of the shop, a soft blanket, a tray with 2 cups of tea, and, of course, a jar of Nutella between them. She dipped her spoon in first. Still the best stress food. He followed suit. Still the best meet-cute prop. They sat in silence for a while, letting the quiet say what words didn't need to. Then Grayson asked, "If you could go back to that night, would you still walk into the wrong room?" Charlotte leaned her head on his shoulder, her voice soft and certain. "Every single time." He kissed the top of her head. "Me too." Outside, the city moved on, as it always did. But inside this tiny bakery, tucked between laughter and lemon tart crumbs, something deeper was being made. Not just cookies, not just a love story the internet had watched unfold, but a life. A messy, sweet, wonderfully imperfect life. And though neither of them knew exactly what would come next, if there would be more chaos, more headlines, more unexpected turns, they knew one thing with delicious certainty. Whatever it was, they'd face it together. With a spoonful of Nutella in one hand, and the other hand wrapped around the one that felt like home. She didn't mean to fall in love. She meant to bake cookies, stay invisible, and survive one more awkward event. But sometimes love crashes into your life dressed in chaos, through wrong doors, unlikely moments, and hearts that were never looking in the first place. Charlotte wasn't polished, famous, or part of anyone's plan, and yet she was exactly what he needed. Not to fix him, but to remind him what home felt like. Because the strongest love stories don't begin with perfection. They begin with truth, with laughter in the kitchen, with silence that feels safe, with someone who sees you exactly as you are and stays anyway. And maybe that's what love really is. Not something you find when you're ready, but something you recognize when you're finally real enough to receive it. Would you open your heart to someone who entered your life by mistake, but stayed on purpose? If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and let us know in the comments. Where are you listening from? Your like helps this channel grow and continue bringing emotional stories like this one. Share it with someone who still believes in unexpected love.